Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Sports and some very big news on a Friday morning. Rassie Erasmus has officially extended his contract to 2031 as expected. We had basically a video went out sort of early November saying that the talks were on hold due to the Autumn Nation series where his lawyer, Rassie Erasmus, was actually basically said that the negotiations were going well and things were looking positive, but they had basically put everything on ice so that they could focus on the sort of final month of Test match rugby. And talks were always supposed to resume this week and were supposedly in a good space. Now, there were rumors about other nations kind of being involved and trying to maybe usurp the deal, I suppose. You know, big links to England. Although Steve Borthwick, I think you're looking at now, especially after the Autumn Nations they have, I think they'll be quite happy with where they are and the kind of the trajectory that sort of Steve Borthwick is moving towards. So I think it's a good space that England are in, and I think they were the only team that Russ has even mentioned potentially coaching before, and probably the only union which kind of has the financial muscle to be able to give him a contract that's difficult to say no to. But Rassie Erasmus has officially committed his future, as is his preference, to the Boks and gotten that 6-year extension. This means that we will see at least another 2 World Cups from Rassie Erasmus. And although I think if we have a terrible 2027 World Cup, they might potentially move him on. But it does mean that there is that security. We talk about the Rassie Erasmus era. I mean, came in 2018. Now it's 2031. I mean, we're not talking about 13 years of the same coach, which is pretty unprecedented when you think of how few coaches have even done double World Cups, let alone 3, let alone 4 World Cups. But it's a massive boost for South Africa rugby, because I think it also really helps with our player retention. Rassie Erasmus spoke this week a little bit about the fact that, older players going to Japan are a really big benefit for the Boks, given the fact that they can kind of extend their careers and maybe play a little bit less. But he's also said that they won't pick, young players who are uncapped from Japan. So, I think if you're a South African player, for example, seeing that kind of commitment, the fact that Rassie Erasmus is going to be there for the next 6 years, you kind of know how to get yourself in the squad. You know what he's looking for. You know what the system is supposedly like with regards to lineman camps, the likes of that. It's a tried and tested system, which means as players, you've got that assurance of, well, I don't need to sort of worry about, who's going to come next to Erasmus. Should I be looking at long-term, now it's about, right, Rassie Erasmus is the coach for the next 6 years. I need to impress him. I need to show him what I'm all about, and I need to get there. So there's obviously a couple of statements. Rassie Erasmus said himself that he's very pleased about the situation and obviously very excited. Mark Alexander, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward decision. Why would you not give a long-term contract to the current best coach in the world? I'd imagine it's pretty good money as well. SA Rugby are looking to almost sort of double their revenue this year. Something like 2 billion rand potentially on the cards, and they've put a lot of big money into a lot of their commercial sort of deals and sponsorship, the likes of that kind of look. Basically, I mean, it's looking at 200-300% the sort of money that they're going to get from the commercial revenue, and hopefully, that's kind of allowing us to be able to give favorable contracts, because a big part of the press release is that they say that announcements regarding other coaches extending will be made in due course. This was a very important part, because they basically said that one of the big stepping stones, or one of the big sort of, not really issues, but one of kind of the more contentious parts of the negotiations with Rassie Erasmus was the extension of his assistants, and basically said that he wants to stay on with his current coaches. He wants to stay on with the current team. He wants to continue this team that we have moving forward to 2031. And, I think SA Rugby, obviously, I mean, they locked down Deon Davids. He wanted to stick a few years ago, your likes of Andy Edwards down to 2027, and then obviously we've added Jerry Flannery, we've added Jacob Paper, we've added Dwayne Vermeulen, we've added Tony Brown. Those are supposed to be up to the next World Cup, and I think the big one obviously is going to be Tony Brown and Jerry Flannery to a certain degree as well. Obviously Felix Jones, I think I'll be interested to sort of see whether we see those sort of extensions, because I think Tony Brown's going to be very, very much in demand. With the way the Boks are playing, a lot of people sort of attributing it towards sort of that Tony Ball kind of concept. He'll be a coach in high demand, especially with the fact that the All Blacks are struggling. Lots of talk about this whole Jamie Joseph potential option from the All Blacks, and sort of Tony Brown coaching alongside him, for example. Lots of people saying that maybe even Tony Brown could take on the head coach of the All Blacks. And it'll be interesting to see if we can lock them down for 6 years. I'd be surprised if you can kind of lock down your international sort of coaches, your Felix Jones, Andy Edwards, Jerry Flannery's, Tony Browns, because they are working away from home. That means they're away from home for 8 to 9 months of the year. Sometimes even more than that. It's tough. It's tough on these sort of, especially when they've got young families, for example, like Andy Edwards, Felix Jones, and it takes a bit of a toll. So that's going to be the next sort of step, really. Now we've got Rassie down to 2031. Obviously, talks about Jacques Nienaber. So, for example, if we see a Jerry Flannery move away off 2027, I think it naturally means Jacques Nienaber comes back into the picture. He could potentially sign a 4-year deal, 2027, 2031, and you can kind of get the Rassie-Jacques duo. What for me will be interesting is, at the moment, life is great. We're the best team in the world. We're playing well, putting on record scores. There's absolutely no reason to panic. There's no reason to feel nervous about anything. But what happens in 2027 if we have an early exit? What happens if we go to the World Cup and we lose to an All Blacks in the quarterfinal? Which would be one of our worst, I think, our second worst World Cup exit ever. If we're not going to go, I don't think out of the round of 16, but if we have a quarterfinal exit, for example, does that then create doubt about Rassie Erasmus? Obviously, we don't know the exact situation. For example, it might be, a 1-point game, the likes of that. But if we crash and burn in the World Cup, you've now got this 4-year contract. It'll be interesting to see long-term then if they would stick there or look to make a change. Because you don't often see these kind of extensions until sort of post-World Cup. Usually you get to the end of World Cup cycles and then they kind of review and make that decision. So I think the last 2 years have convinced SA Rugby that there's enough, and of course there's enough history and current performance and barometers wise, you're looking at heading to such a high level, there's enough incentive to and proof that Rassie Erasmus is the best option and to extend rather further than that. I think we're about to see the golden era of SA Rugby, and it's ironic because we've just obviously had 2 back-to-back World Cups, and we're playing such good rugby at the moment. But I also think that with the really heightened revenues we're now seeing in SA Rugby, hopefully that filters down to our unions. I'm really hoping we're going to see a Champions Cup win, for example, more URC trophies and the likes of that from our local sides in the next sort of 10 years. And I also think the women's program, I think we're in for a very, very interesting 5 to 6 years. I think this between now and 2030 is going to be a potential golden era for SA Rugby if they can get it right. If we can get all our different structures right, get the Currie Cup going again, the SA Rugby, Springboks are right there already. We've got to get our women's side up there as well. We've got to make sure our 7 side continues to thrive. But I think that we really are in such a positive space where it kind of feels like everything's going well. We might come crashing down at a point, but if we can capitalize on the current momentum, we can build ourselves into the greatest rugby vehicle on the planet. And that's what needs to be the focus of SA Rugby. And it starts with having a good Springbok side, which starts by having the best Springbok coach or the best coach for the Springboks. And we definitely have that in Rassie Erasmus. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Smash a like, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve, and I'll chat to you soon.